The microphone screeched, a high-pitched whine that mirrored the scream building inside me. I gripped my celebratory champagne flute, the condensation slick against my palm as I watched my brother saunter to the center of the room. He tapped the mic, a smug grin plastered across his face, and that's when I knew this wasn't going to be the night I had dreamed of. This wasn't about celebrating my hard work. It was about something far more sinister, a public dismantling of everything I had achieved. The air crackled with anticipation, but underneath, a cold dread was creeping into my bones because I knew exactly what was coming and the humiliation that it would bring. If you've ever felt betrayed by a family member, subscribe now to hear how Elizabeth took back control. My graduation party. Years of relentless study, sleepless nights fueled by instant coffee, and the gnawing anxiety that I wouldn't be good enough had all culminated in this moment. I had finally earned my degree, a tangible symbol of my perseverance, my ticket to a future I had painstakingly crafted. My parents had thrown this lavish party, inviting all our relatives, family, friends, and even some of my professors. It was supposed to be a triumphant celebration, a proud display of my accomplishments, but as I watched my brother adjust the microphone, I knew this was about to turn into something else entirely. The years of subtle digs, the backhanded compliments, the constant comparisons to my more successful siblings had all led to this orchestrated moment of public shamming. He cleared his throat, the sound amplified through the speakers, and then he spoke the words that would shatter my world. "Let's raise a toast," he began, his voice dripping with sarcasm, "to the family black sheep." The words hung in the air, heavy and toxic, but the worst part wasn't the insult itself, it was the reaction. A ripple of laughter spread through the crowd, starting with my parents and cascading outwards, encompassing aunts, uncles, and cousins. I stood frozen, the smile plastered on my face feeling brittle and fake, as I watched the people I loved, the people I thought loved me, openly mocking me. In that instant, something inside me shifted. The years of trying to please them, of seeking their approval, crumbled into dust. I had always felt like an outsider in my own family, the odd one out, the one who never quite measured up. I used to brush it off, telling myself it was all in good fun, a harmless family dynamic. But as I stood there, surrounded by their laughter, I realized that they truly believed it, and that's when Elizabeth knew things had to change. The laughter subsided, but the silence that followed was even more deafening. I forced a smile, raised my glass, and took a sip of champagne, trying to appear unfazed. But inside, a storm was brewing. I excused myself, retreating to the relative sanctuary of the garden, the cool night air a welcome contrast to the suffocating atmosphere inside. I leaned against a stone wall, the rough texture digging into my back, and closed my eyes, taking a deep breath. I couldn't let them see how much they had hurt me. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction. The party continued, the music and chatter a dull roar in the background, but I was no longer present. I was already planning my escape, my silent rebellion against a family that had never truly accepted me. I knew in that moment that things would never be the same. 3 days later, I acted. It was a simple move, a quiet assertion of my independence. I froze the accounts, severing the financial ties that bound me to them. It wasn't about the money, it was about control, about reclaiming my power. 1 week later, a moving truck arrived at my apartment. I packed my belongings, a carefully curated collection of books, clothes, and memories, and left the city behind. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I simply vanished, leaving them to wonder, to speculate, to fill the void with their own assumptions. I needed space, time to heal, to rebuild myself on my own terms. I found a small cottage nestled in the countryside, far from the city's noise and the suffocating presence of my family. I spent my days hiking through the woods, reading by the fire, and rediscovering who I was outside of their expectations. But the past has a way of catching up, even in the most remote corners of the world. A thick envelope landed in my mailbox, postmarked with a familiar city address. Curiosity and a touch of morbid fascination compelled me to open it. Inside, I found copies of emails, meticulously printed and organized, revealing a plot so insidious it made my blood run cold. My brother, the one who had humiliated me at my graduation party, had been secretly working to sabotage my career for months. He had contacted my former professors, spreading rumors about my academic abilities, and had even reached out to potential employers, attempting to poison the well before I even had a chance to apply. The person I trusted most was one of them. He wanted to steal my entire career. The revelation hit me like a physical blow, the carefully constructed peace I had cultivated shattering into a million pieces. Sleepless nights followed, the cottage no longer a sanctuary but a prison of my own thoughts. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of leaves outside my window sounded like approaching footsteps, like the whispers of my brother's betrayal closing in. I tried to rationalize it, to find some explanation for his actions, but the truth was inescapable. He had deliberately tried to destroy me, fueled by jealousy and a deep-seated need to control. The crimson of the sunset seemed to mock me, a constant reminder of the anger bubbling beneath my skin. I attempted to confront him, composing scathing emails filled with accusations and demands for answers, but I never sent them. What was the point? He would only deny it, twist the narrative to make himself the victim. I knew that I couldn't engage with him on his terms. I had to find another way to fight back, a way that would expose his lies and reclaim my life without descending to his level. The weight of injustice pressed down on me, a heavy cloak threatening to suffocate me. I started having nightmares, vivid and disturbing, where faceless figures chased me through endless corridors, their laughter echoing the cruel mockery of my family at the graduation party. I would wake up in a cold sweat, my heart pounding, the line between reality and nightmare blurred. My hands shook as I tried to go back to sleep, only to be pulled back into the terror that haunted my dreams. I tried to focus on my healing, on the quiet solitude of the countryside, but the emails had poisoned everything. Every success I had ever achieved, every compliment I had ever received, was now tainted with the suspicion that it was undeserved, that my brother had somehow manipulated things behind the scenes. I started doubting myself, questioning my abilities, wondering if I was truly as capable as I thought I was. I even considered giving up on my career altogether, retreating into a life of anonymity and obscurity. But the thought of letting him win, of allowing him to dictate my future, was unbearable. I knew I had to fight back, not just for myself, but for everyone who had ever been underestimated, betrayed, or silenced. I began to meticulously document everything, creating a detailed timeline of my brother's actions, gathering evidence to support my claims. It was a painstaking process, requiring hours of research and careful analysis, but it gave me a sense of purpose, a feeling that I was finally taking control of the situation. I knew that exposing him wouldn't be easy. He was a master manipulator, skilled at charming people and twisting the truth. But I was determined to unmask him, to show the world the person he truly was, no matter the cost. The days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, as I continued my investigation, unearthing more and more evidence of my brother's sabotage. I discovered that he had not only contacted my professors and potential employers, but had also spread false rumors about my personal life, attempting to damage my reputation and isolate me from my friends and colleagues. The extent of his malice was staggering. It was as if he had made it his life's mission to destroy me. I felt a surge of anger so intense that it threatened to consume me. I wanted to lash out, to confront him with his lies, but I knew that I had to remain calm and strategic. Any rash actions would only play into his hands, giving him the opportunity to discredit me and portray himself as the victim. I started compiling all the information, every email, text message, and conversation into a single file. I knew I had to be patient, wait for the perfect opportunity to strike. The universe would show me the right moment to reveal his deception to the world. During this time, I lost contact with most of my friends and family. I couldn't trust anyone, not even my parents, who had always seemed to favor my brother. I feared that they were complicit in his scheme, or at least turned a blind eye to his behavior. The isolation was crushing, but it also strengthened my resolve. I realized that I only had myself to rely on and that I had to be my own advocate, my own protector. As I dug deeper, I uncovered a pattern of behavior that extended far beyond his attacks on me. He had sabotaged other people's careers, spread malicious rumors, and manipulated those around him for his own personal gain. He was a master of deception, skilled at hiding his true nature behind a facade of charm and charisma. But I was determined to expose him, to reveal the darkness that lurked beneath the surface. My vision blurred. The glass in my hand shattered as I was reminded of that graduation party. No one would ever hurt me like that again. The silence I once held had now evolved into a plan of action. This was far from over. The weight of his betrayal pressed down on me, suffocating me in a darkness I never knew existed. I started experiencing panic attacks, gasping for air as my chest tightened, convinced that I was about to cease. The once familiar walls of the cottage seemed to close in, transforming my sanctuary into a prison. Food became tasteless, sleep an elusive luxury. I was trapped in a cycle of anxiety and despair, haunted by the ghosts of my past and the fear of my future. I considered ending it all, disappearing from the world and leaving my brother to celebrate his victory. The temptation was overwhelming, a seductive whisper promising release from the pain, but something deep inside me refused to give in. A flicker of defiance, a stubborn refusal to let him win, kept me clinging to life. I remembered my grandmother's words, spoken during a time of hardship. When you think you have nothing left, that's when you find out what you're truly made of. Her words echoed in my mind, a lifeline in the abyss. I realized that ending it would be the ultimate act of surrender, a validation of my brother's cruelty. I couldn't let him have that satisfaction. I had to fight back, not just for myself, but for my grandmother, for all the people who had ever been hurt and silenced. I unclenched my fists, took a deep breath, and made a decision. I would not be a victim anymore. The next morning, I woke up with a newfound sense of clarity. The darkness hadn't disappeared, but it no longer held me captive. I felt a cold, unwavering determination settle over me, replacing the fear and despair. I started researching my brother's past, delving into his business dealings, his personal relationships, and his social interactions. I spoke to former colleagues, old friends, and even some of his ex-partners, piecing together a comprehensive picture of his character and his methods. The more I learned, the more disgusted I became. He was a pathological liar, a manipulator, and a user. He had left a trail of broken promises and shattered lives in his wake. But his arrogance was also his weakness. He believed he was untouchable, that he could get away with anything because he was smarter and more powerful than everyone else. That was where he was wrong. I had always been underestimated, dismissed as the quiet, unassuming sister. But I had a keen mind, a sharp intuition, and an unwavering resolve. I would use his arrogance against him, turning his own weapons against him. I started meticulously planning my revenge, mapping out every step of my strategy with cold precision. I would expose him, not through angry accusations or emotional outbursts, but through carefully documented evidence and irrefutable proof. I would reveal his lies to the world, shattering his carefully constructed facade and exposing the darkness that lurked beneath. It would be a slow, calculated dismantling of his life, a complete and utter destruction of everything he held dear. I would take away his reputation, his career, his relationships, and his sense of self-worth. He would be left with nothing but the consequences of his actions, a hollow shell of the man he once was. As I delved deeper into my plan, I felt a strange sense of liberation. The anger and resentment were still there, but they were now channeled into a focused, unwavering purpose. I was no longer a victim. I was a strategist, a warrior, a force to be reckoned with. I spent hours poring over documents, analyzing financial records, and tracking down witnesses who could corroborate my claims. I contacted a lawyer, a sharp, ruthless woman who specialized in defamation cases. She listened to my story with a cold, clinical detachment, asking probing questions and demanding concrete evidence. At first, I was intimidated by her, but I soon realized that she was exactly the kind of ally I needed. She wouldn't be swayed by emotions or personal connections. She would simply follow the facts and fight for my cause with relentless determination. With her help, I began to build an airtight case against my brother, a case that would leave no room for doubt or denial. The days turned into weeks and weeks into months as I meticulously prepared for my final strike. I knew that I only had one chance to get it right. If I failed, my brother would bury me, silencing me forever. I had to be patient, strategic, and utterly ruthless. I learned everything I could about his business dealings, his personal life, and his social connections. I uncovered secrets he had desperately tried to keep hidden, betrayals and lies that would shock and disgust those around him. I gathered evidence of his financial wrongdoings, his manipulative tactics, and his abusive behavior. The more I learned, the more determined I became to bring him down. I knew that I was playing a dangerous game, that he would stop at nothing to protect himself. But I was no longer afraid. I had faced my demons, and I had emerged stronger and more determined than ever before. I was ready to unleash my revenge, to expose his lies and reclaim my life. The day they tried to end me. was the day revenge was born. I smiled, I played their game, but I was recording everything. The cottage became my war room. Every wall was covered in photos, timelines, financial statements, a meticulously constructed web of my brother's life. I needed to know his routines, his weaknesses, his pressure points. I installed security cameras around the perimeter of the property, not for my protection, but to monitor anyone who might be watching me. I purchased a high-end audio recorder, small enough to conceal in my purse or pocket, and began practicing my interrogation techniques. I watched hours of true crime documentaries, studying the methods used by law enforcement to extract confessions and expose lies. I learned how to read microexpressions, how to detect subtle shifts in body language, how to exploit vulnerabilities and insecurities. I knew that when the time came to confront my brother, I couldn't afford to make any mistakes. I also hired a digital forensics expert, a former government agent who specialized in recovering deleted files and tracing online activity. He was expensive, but worth every penny. He helped me uncover a trove of incriminating emails, text messages, and financial records that my brother had tried to erase. He also taught me how to protect myself from cyber attacks and surveillance, advising me to use encrypted messaging apps, virtual private networks, and burner phones. I knew that my brother was likely monitoring my online activity, so I took every precaution to remain invisible. One afternoon, while reviewing my brother's financial records, I stumbled upon a series of suspicious transactions involving an offshore bank account. The account was registered under a shell corporation, and the funds were being used to pay bribes to government officials and launder money from illegal activities. This was the leverage I needed. Not only would this destroy his career, but it would put him behind bars. I contacted my lawyer and shared my findings. She was thrilled, telling me that this was the smoking gun we needed to take him down. She immediately filed a complaint with the appropriate authorities, triggering a formal investigation into my brother's financial affairs. I knew that once the investigation began, it would only be a matter of time before his entire empire crumbled. But I couldn't afford to sit back and wait. I needed to control the narrative, to ensure that the truth was exposed to the world before my brother had a chance to spin it in his favor. I decided to leak the information to a journalist, a respected investigative reporter who had a reputation for uncovering corruption and holding powerful people accountable. I sent her an anonymous email, outlining the details of my brother's financial crimes and providing her with copies of the incriminating documents. I knew that she would verify the information and publish a story that would blow the lid off his entire operation. I anticipated their every move. I knew they would try to discredit me to paint me as a disgruntled sibling seeking revenge. I was ready for them. I documented everything, every lie, every manipulation, everything. The news broke on a Thursday morning. The headlines screamed across the front page of the newspaper, "Local businessman accused of money laundering and bribery." The article detailed my brother's financial crimes, his offshore bank accounts, and his connections to corrupt government officials. It also included excerpts from the incriminating documents I had provided, leaving no room for doubt about his guilt. The reaction was swift and brutal. My brother's company's stock price plummeted, his business partners distanced themselves from him, and his political allies abandoned him. He was immediately suspended from his position and faced the prospect of criminal charges. The phone rang constantly. It was reporters, lawyers, and family members all clamoring for answers. I ignored them all. I watched the chaos unfold from the safety of my cottage, a sense of grim satisfaction washing over me. But I knew that this was only the beginning. The real battle was yet to come. I was ready. My brother's biggest weakness? He thought he was untouchable. That's where he messed up. He underestimated the quiet sister. One evening, I received a call from my brother. His voice was trembling with rage and desperation. He demanded to know why I had done this to him, accusing me of trying to ruin his life. I remained calm and composed, telling him that he had brought this upon himself. I told him that he had spent years trying to sabotage my career, spread lies about me, and manipulate those around him. I told him that I was simply giving him a taste of his own medicine. He denied everything, insisting that he had never done anything to hurt me, but I wasn't buying it. I knew the truth, and I had the evidence to prove it. I ended the call, feeling a sense of closure. I had finally confronted him and I had emerged victorious, but I knew that he wouldn't give up easily. He would fight back using every weapon at his disposal. I had to be prepared for anything. The final card rested with me and I was ready to strike. I knew my revenge would bring satisfaction. The journalist, bless her soul, didn't waste a second. Within hours, the story was everywhere. TV, radio, online, my brother's face was plastered across every screen, each image more damning than the last. The empire he'd so carefully constructed was crumbling before his eyes, and I was there to watch it all burn. But the best part, the investigation had just begun. The authorities were already digging into his finances, interviewing his associates, and subpoenaing documents. It was only a matter of time before they uncovered even more dirt, more secrets, more lies. And I, of course, had no intention of letting them down. I had a few more cards up my sleeve, just waiting for the right moment to play. I knew that my brother wouldn't go down without a fight. He was a cornered animal, and he was dangerous. I had to be careful to anticipate his every move to stay one step ahead. But I was ready. I had been preparing for this moment for years. The day of reckoning had arrived, and I was going to make sure he paid for everything he had done. Every lie, every betrayal, every act of cruelty. He was going to lose everything, and I was going to enjoy every minute of it. The offshore account was just the tip of the iceberg. As the authorities dug deeper, they uncovered a web of corruption that stretched far and wide, implicating politicians, business leaders, and even members of law enforcement. My brother had been running a sophisticated criminal enterprise for years, using his wealth and influence to buy off anyone who got in his way. He had been trafficking substances, evading taxes, and exploiting vulnerable people for his own personal gain. The scale of his depravity was staggering. Each new revelation was more shocking than the last, each more damaging to his reputation. The media was having a field day and the public was outraged. Protests erupted outside his office building and calls for his arrest grew louder. He was quickly becoming a pariah, shunned by everyone he knew. But even as his world collapsed around him, he refused to admit his guilt. He continued to deny all the allegations, claiming that he was the victim of a witch hunt. He accused me of orchestrating the entire conspiracy, portraying himself as an innocent man being persecuted by his jealous sister. But nobody believed him. The evidence was overwhelming, and his lies were transparent. His carefully constructed facade had finally crumbled, revealing the ugly truth beneath. I knew he'd be coming. It was only a matter of time before he tried to confront me, to plead with me, to threaten me. I made sure the security system was armed, the doors were locked, and the recorder was ready. When his car finally pulled up to the cottage, I wasn't surprised. I watched him on the security monitor, his face contorted with rage and desperation. He pounded on the door, shouting my name, demanding that I let him in. I remained silent, watching him like a predator stalking its prey. After what seemed like an eternity, he finally gave up and retreated to his car. But I knew he wouldn't stay away for long. He was too desperate, too arrogant to accept defeat. He would be back, and next time he wouldn't be so polite. I spent the rest of the night packing the floor, waiting for him to make his move. I knew he was capable of anything. He was a dangerous man with nothing to lose. I had to be ready to defend myself, to protect myself from his wrath. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about survival. It was about protecting myself from a man who would stop at nothing to silence me. The call came at 3:17 a.m. My brother's voice, thick with a cocktail of desperation and anger, cut through the silence. "I know it was you," he spat, the words laced with a venom I hadn't heard since childhood. "You did this, you ruined me." I let him rant, each word a confirmation that my plan was working. He was unraveling, and the sound was music to my ears. "Why?" he finally choked out, the anger momentarily replaced by something akin to pain. "Why would you do this to your own brother?" I paused, savoring the moment. "Because you deserved it," I said, my voice cold and devoid of emotion. "You spent years trying to destroy me, now it's my turn." The line went dead. I knew he was coming. The game was about to reach its climax. I checked the cameras one last time, ensuring every angle was covered. The cottage was now a fortress, and I was ready to defend it. I settled into the chair, the recorder within easy reach, and waited. The silence was deafening, broken only by the pounding of my own heart. Then I saw headlights approaching. He didn't bother with the door this time. A rock shattered the living room window, the sound echoing through the cottage. I didn't flinch. I knew he was coming. I activated the security system, the alarms blaring as he climbed through the broken window, his face a mask of fury. "You witch!" he screamed, lunging toward me. I'm going to make you pay for this. I stood my ground, my eyes fixed on his, a sense of cold detachment washing over me. It's over, brother's name, I said, my voice calm and steady. You've lost. He lunged again, and this time I was ready. I grabbed the taser from the table beside me and pressed the trigger. The electricity arced through the air, and he froze, his body convulsing as he collapsed to the floor. The alarms continued to blare, the only sound in the room besides his ragged breathing. I stood over him, the taser still in my hand, and watched as the last vestiges of his power drained away. It was over. I had won. But the game was just starting. The alarms wailed, painting the room in strobing red and blue. He lay there, twitching, the fight gone from his eyes, replaced by a dawning horror. Not just at the electricity coursing through him, but at the utter and complete failure of his plan. He'd come here to intimidate me, maybe even silence me permanently. But he'd walked into a trap. I reached for my phone, dialing 911. I need to report a home invasion, I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline surging through my veins. The intruder is incapacitated, but armed and dangerous. I gave them my address and waited, watching my brother squirm on the floor. The police arrived quickly, sirens screaming, lights flashing. They burst into the cottage, guns drawn, and immediately apprehended him. As they dragged him away in handcuffs, his eyes met mine. There was no rage left, only a hollow emptiness. He knew it was over. The next few weeks were a blur of legal proceedings and media frenzy. My brother was charged with a long list of crimes, including attempted assault, breaking and entering, and obstruction of justice. The evidence against him was overwhelming, and he had no way to defend himself. The offshore accounts, the bribes, the substance trafficking, it was all laid bare for the world to see. His business empire crumbled, his reputation was ruined, and his freedom was taken away. He was a broken man, stripped of everything he held dear. During the trial, I testified against him, recounting the years of abuse and manipulation I had endured at his hands. I spoke calmly and clearly, presenting the evidence I had gathered, exposing his lies and deceit. The courtroom was silent as I spoke, everyone hanging on my every word. When I finished, there was a collective gasp, followed by a murmur of outrage. The jury deliberated for only a few hours before returning a guilty verdict. My brother was sentenced to a lengthy prison term, his life effectively over. I watched as they led him away, his shoulders slumped, his head bowed. He didn't look at me, didn't acknowledge my presence. He was a ghost, a shadow of the man he once was. As I walked out of the courthouse, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Relief, certainly, but also a profound sadness. I had spent so many years consumed by anger and resentment, fueled by a desire for revenge. Now that it was over, I felt empty, lost. The victory was hollow. The days that followed were filled with quiet reflection. I sold the cottage, unable to bear the memories it held. I moved to a new city, started a new life. I focused on healing, on rebuilding myself, on finding peace. It wasn't easy. The scars of the past ran deep. But I was determined to move forward, to create a future free from the darkness that had haunted me for so long. Slowly, gradually, I began to heal. I reconnected with old friends, made new ones, and rediscovered my passions. I learned to forgive myself, and to let go of the anger and resentment that had consumed me for so long. I realized that revenge, while satisfying in the moment, ultimately offered no true closure. The only way to truly heal was to move on, to forgive, and to create a better future. Years passed. I built a successful career, found love, and started a family. I never forgot what had happened, but I refused to let it define me. I learned from my experiences, and I used them to become a stronger, more resilient person. One day, I received a letter from my brother. He was still in prison, but he had found religion and was seeking forgiveness. He apologized for everything he had done, acknowledging the pain and suffering he had caused. He asked if I could ever find it in my heart to forgive him. I thought about it for a long time. It wasn't easy, but I finally realized that holding onto anger and resentment was only hurting me. I wrote him back, telling him that I forgave him. It wasn't for him, but for myself. It was a way of finally letting go of the past and moving on with my life. I never saw him again. He passed away in prison a few years later, but I knew that he had found peace, and that was enough. They tried to end me. They failed. Revenge isn't sweet. It's necessary. Would you have done the same? Let me know in the comments. Subscribe for more justice.